When discussing what is the most difficult aspect of halacha to deal with, people generally say one of two things, depending upon what they know about, either eruving or gittin, both of which are extremely complex areas of halacha, but people that have done both universally say that gittin is harder, for a very simple reason. When you're doing a get, you get one shaila after another, and you have to immediately give an answer. You can't say, wait, we're going to stop. I have to go research this. We'll continue in an hour, right? I mean, that's not a possibility. Or we'll continue in 3 days. But however, when you're building an eruv, right? If I can't figure out how to make the mechitza in this place, the boundary of the eruv, right? I can always go research it, right? And come back and look at it and see what my options are and figure out what I can do here that will work. It's not an option in the get. It's just, you have to do it immediately. However, having said that, both eruvin and gittin, I'm looking at something and I can determine what the halacha is in that thing. Giyur is entirely different. Conversions are entirely different, and I will tell you, I find them to be absolutely the hardest thing in halacha. Why? Not because the halacha is difficult, but because the obligation on the Beit Din is to determine whether this person is not only sincere now, but whether we believe that they will continue to keep mitzvos in the future, right? It's not what's going on in front of me, right? It's the pasuk says that man sees with his eyes and God sees the heart, right? The word Elohim can be used in Tanakh either for a judge, right? Or God. Sometimes in the Beit Din you have to play a little bit of this God element, right? To predict what is going to be a number of years in the future, right? And so it's the halacha is demanding something of the Beit Din and Giyur that is not demanded any place else at all. All right, and therefore it's making a demand that is much harder to analyze than any of the other things. So the halachas of Giyur are very, very simple. There are two simanim in the Shulchan Aruch that deal with it. They're not particularly long. They're not short, but they're not long. One deals with who the ger can marry after they've converted, and relationships and so on. And technically, they're a newborn creature, so in the Torah, they could marry anyone. They could marry their parent, they could marry their child, and so on. However, the Chachamim made a gezerah that said, we don't want saying, Bati mi kedusha chamora le kedusha kala. I came from a stricter, more restrictions upon myself to less restrictions upon myself. Therefore, everything that was prohibited is still prohibited. It's rabbinic enactment. Anyway.
What about Kohanim?
What?
Kohanim also.
A Gioris can't marry a Kohen. That's the Kohen's problem, not her problem.
What do you mean?
The Kohen has a prohibition of marrying certain people. It is not there. No place in the Torah does it say a Gioris is prohibited to marry Kohen. It says a Kohen is not allowed to marry certain categories of people.
I see. That's
not her problem. It's his problem. Right? You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. All right. According to the Gemara, Giyur is slightly different than we do it today, although not a huge amount. According to the Gemara, someone comes and we tell them how difficult it is to be Jewish. This is not really something you want to do. And if they insist, and we see that they're sincere about it, we convert them and then we start teaching them. All right? No one does it that way anymore. Nowadays, if we see that they're sincere, we allow them to study. We try and convince them through the period of study that this really isn't a good idea, You have to be a little bit crazy to want to be Jewish, and if you're crazy, of course, then the Beit Din can't accept that you're giving So why the change? The reason is very simple. If you were converting in the time of the Gemara, or even 200 years ago, Jews lived only among Jews, and all Jews were observant to one extent or another, right? And so you would immediately, if you converted, move from a non-Jewish environment into a Jewish environment. And if you didn't say a bracha, someone would say, "Oh, what are you doing? You have to say this bracha over that thing," right? Very quickly, you would learn the various things that you have to know to be Jewish, right? Whereas today, it's a completely different environment. Someone, if they haven't learned, they will not learn in the future, or it's not inherently necessary that they would learn what it is. Therefore, everyone agrees we make people learn first. They have to learn the basic things that someone has to learn to live a normal Orthodox lifestyle. We say, the Gemara says, Kabbalah's mitzvahs chutz midavar echad is posel, that it's someone who accepts all the mitzvahs except for one thing. So you know what, I accept this as mitzvah, we're not allowed to convert them. In the 50s, this is an unpublished tshuva from Ramesha Feinstein. In the 50s, a woman came before the Beit Din in Cleveland and said she wanted to convert, and they were convinced of her sincerity and so on. But she said, "I am not sure whether I will be able to refrain from speaking Lashon Hara." All right? And the Beit Din was concerned, maybe this is Kabbalah's mitzvahs, chutz midavar echad, right? She's accepting all the mitzvahs except for one thing. And therefore, they weren't sure whether they can convert her or not. And they asked Ramesha the Shaila, can we convert this woman? And Ramesha said two very important things. He said, one, she is accepting that there is a prohibition of Lashon Hara. She's not saying she's not saying I will accept all the mitzvahs except I don't accept the mitzvah, the prohibition of Lashon Hara. She's accepting that there is a prohibition of Lashon Hara. She's just not sure she'll be able to refrain from speaking Lashon Hara. It's a different thing. And this, by the way, is a position put forward first by the Beis Yitzhak, mid-1800s, Rabbi Yitzhak Shmelkes, one of the leading poskim in Europe at the time. He said that Shmiras mitzvahs and Kabbalah's mitzvahs, observing mitzvahs and accepting mitzvahs, are the same thing. So he argued that, in fact, gear was only a theoretical thing and not a practical thing. Because he said, if at any point in the ger's life after they convert, they do something that's usher, that uproots the gear. Right? Because it's showing...
At that moment or in general?
At any point, they do an avera.
From that time on?
From the point of the conversion on for the rest of their life. If at any point they do an avera... Doesn't matter.
No, I mean, they do the avera, and then from that point on, they wouldn't be.
No,
retroactively.
Retroactively, it shows that they were never Jewish because they never accepted mitzvahs properly.
Do we really expect them to be perfect tzaddikim?
So therefore, he said, "Ein tzaddik baretz yaseh tov v'lo yachta." It's impossible, it says in Mishlei, for someone to be a complete tzaddik and never sin. So he argued that gear is something that's only theoretical and not actual.
It can't actually be done.
Can't actually be done. That was essentially his argument. By the way, that was the argument. It was continued by Rav Eliashiv. Right? He essentially said, we see that people aren't, sometimes with this or that, they don't keep it, and that's showing that they weren't actually makabel mitzvahs.
But hold on, there's plenty of gayrim, even in Rabbi Akiva's family, plenty. That's
all right.
It's a big.
So, Reb Chaim Ozer Grudinsky wrote against this, and he said, Kabbalah's mitzvahs means I accept that there is a prohibition, and if I fail to do this properly or refrain from this or whatever it is, that I will be punished for that. That's Kabbalah's mitzvahs. Shmiras mitzvahs is whether you in fact succeed in doing it or not. All right?
It also implies there's no concept of tshuva for
Let's stay away from that. Let's try and keep it as tightly as possible. I'll say one thing. There are many tshuvos that refer to the process of gear as an act of tshuva. It's in general. So this is a basic idea that a person is accepting the rubric of mitzvahs, right? By the way, if you accept Rav Shmelka's argument, the paradigm of gear was the Jewish people converted to Judaism at Har Sinai. Right? They went to the mikveh, they had a bris for the men, and they accepted the Torah. Now, if you say a future act, a future avera uproots the past gear, what was Klal Yisrael doing 40 days after Matan Torah? Egel, Hazahav, Avodah Zarah. So therefore, that's uprooting, according to his argument, their conversion, right? And so no one's Jewish, right? I mean, that would be the natural continuation of his argument.
I'll supply the cheeseburgers.
No, the vast, by the way, even before Rosh Milkus, there was a set of tshuvas called Chutam Shulash, which is Reb Chaim of Volozhin, his son and his grandson, both of whom were Rosh Yeshiva, also in Volozhin. It's their tshuvas. And there's a tshuva from Reb Chaim of Volozhin, asked about someone that, after the gear violates something, was an actual case, and he said they're still Jewish. The Rambam says, Afal Pishi Chata Yisrael, who even though he sins afterwards, he's still a Jew. What are you can't do this. So there has been a major tumult about this in modern day, present day approach to gear. And the history of the vast majority of the poskim is that if we see, at least immediately afterwards, the people are keeping mitzvahs. Ramesha says, if you see, the first Shabbos afterwards, they're Mechal Shabbos.
That's a problem.
Then it's a problem. That's showing that they weren't really accepting mitzvahs at all, right? But if you get back to Ramesha's tshuva, right? This woman says, I accept there's a prohibition of Lashon Hara, but I don't know whether I will be able to refrain from speaking Lashon Hara. I had a chavrusa once, when he first got married. He and his wife decided they would never allow Lashon Hara to be spoken at their Shabbos table, or if they were a guest at someone else's Shabbos table, they would stop anyone who was speaking Lashon Hara. Within 6 weeks, no one would come to their house for Shabbos, and no one would have them over for Shabbos. But, so Ramesha said, she's accepting there's a prohibition of Lashon Hara. She's just saying she doesn't know whether she'll be able to do it. She's expecting it. She's accepting that if she speaks Lashon Hara, she'll be punished for that. That's Kabbalah's mitzvahs, and therefore you can convert her. Now, he addresses another thing. Obviously, if someone says, I'm not going to keep Shabbos, right? We're not going to convert them. So he asks a question that wasn't asked to him, and that is, what is the minimum level of actual observance, right? There are certain things that very, very few people do, right? There's the Gemara that says, "V'kulam," some people are caught with illicit sexual relations. More people are caught with theft, right? You pick up you sign, you're in your lawyer's office, you sign something and you put the pen in your pocket, right? It's theft, right? But we don't think about it. It happens, It's happened. Some people are very careful, it never happens. But basically, this type of thing, people do, unfortunately. And the Gemara says, everyone is caught by Lashon Hara. All right? So Ramesh says, what are we demanding? What is the minimal demand? And he says, you cannot demand more of a gear than most of the people, the quote, firm people in that time and place are doing. All right?
But firm is also very general, right?
there are certain minimum definitions that we have of this, which I'm not going to get into. But, there is an Orthodox community, right? And rabbis are required not to let people be a witness for Kedushin, for instance, that isn't firm, right? So he knows, he has an idea of what that is, right?
I thought it was just Shomer Shabbos.
No, there are other things included as well. Any Avera Shel Hamas, any act of corruption, anyone that's not careful with all the mitzvahs of Arayos is certainly possible for Kedushin. There are many things. It's not only Shomer Shabbos. It's not only Shomer Shabbos. There are many things that are required. Shaila and the Chassam Sofer, because the Gemara says a person is apostolate if they shave. All right? By the time Chassam Sofer time, many people were shaving. So is a person apostolate if they shave or not? In his time, there weren't electric razors yet, so it's a different issue. But I'm just saying, and he says because it's so widely done now, and people are no longer aware of how strict the Isser is, that he's clearly not happy with it. But he says he wouldn't posel someone as an aid. He wouldn't ask someone to be an aid to shave. But if someone who shaved was an aid for something, he wouldn't, after the fact, invalidate it because of that. All right. So once we're convinced someone's sincere, we test them to make sure they actually know how to observe mitzvahs now. We want to see, and so on. Then they go to the mikveh, they're immersed in the mikveh, and we ask, when they're in the mikveh, before they actually completely immerse, we ask them a series of questions about mitzvahs kalas and mitzvahs chumrah, serious mitzvahs and light mitzvahs, to see whether they actually want to do this. They take an oath to perform the mitzvahs of the Torah, and then they immerse in the mikveh, and they come out, and we say, Mazel Tov, you're Jewish. Or Baruch Dayanemes, you're Jewish, whatever.
Yes, for the donation.
What about
What?
for men?
There's a bris milah or before, or hatafas dam bris immediately before the immersion in the mikveh.
But if they're newly born, it should be 8 days after their conversion, right?
No, this is a different thing. If a woman is converting with a newly born son, the conversion is the bris is done whenever the child's going to be immersed, or before the child's immersed, even less than 8 days.
You said that when a person is
Yes.
converting, they're considered a newborn person themselves.
No, but the milah, the foreskin prevents the tevilah from working, so it has to be in advance.
They still have to wait a week or something to
Depends.
for Pesach.
Well, first of all, that's different because there's tuma involved that has to do with karbanos. That has nothing to do with us today. I mean, it still has to heal, which takes some time. I mean, if you're talking about in the United States, where almost everyone's circumcised anyway, you're talking about hatafas dam bris. It takes 3 seconds to heal, literally. And I think most dayanim know how to do it. We don't use moalim generally because it's a very easy procedure to do. Anyway. I've basically explained the laws of conversion. Believe it or not, it's been done. Just a few minutes. The one tricky element that I haven't addressed is children, and there are 2 possibilities with children. Either the father brings the child to be converted, right? In which case the child doesn't have the ability to reject the conversion as an adult, because the Gemara says, "Nachle b'mad avid le'avua," that in general a child is happy with what their father does for them. Right? This is a general principle. I know there are abusive people and so on, but in general we accept that. However, what happens if it's not a parent that's bringing the child to the conversion? This can be an adoptive child, right? Can an adoptive child reject what the adoptive parents did? This is a very interesting thing because it may be because the father has certain rights, halachic rights over his children, right? Therefore, the father has the right to do things. If that's the reason why it's true, then the adoptive parents, once the adoption is complete, and we won't do a year before the adoption completes, sometimes, depending on the states, it can take, 6 months, a year. If the mother has the birth mother has that amount of time to reject, to say, I changed my mind, I want the child back, Depending, again, this varies from state to state and so on. But you have to make sure that before you do a conversion, that it's the adoption is irrevocable at this point. If you say it's because of the paternal rights in the child, then it would be the adoptive parents that have those rights, and they could do it. If you say it's simply because a child is happy with what his parents do for him, right, that's a different issue, because these aren't actually his parents.
Are there Jewish laws protecting adoptive parents?
It's a very difficult thing to talk about, because we don't, first of all, we don't really have parental rights. There are what a Beit Din is supposed to consider. There's a long tshuva from Rav Herzog on this that's brilliant, where he says there's no such thing as maternal rights, there's no such thing as paternal rights. The only issue in front of the Beit Din, in terms of a child custody case, for instance, is what's in the best interest of the child. I don't care what's in the best interest of the parents. My job as the Beit Din right now is to figure out what's in the best interest of this child. And that's what the child gets, what's best for them. So that question is, but in the Middle Ages, in the time of the Tosfos along the Rhine River, there were a Jewish family and a non-Jewish family. The non-Jewish family lived closer to the river. They were the adjacent house to the river. And there was a flood, as happened from time to time before we had dams that worked to prevent these things. And the non-Jewish house was swept away in the flood. And both families had a 5-year-old girl. And the girl from the family whose house was wiped away was playing with the other girl at the time, the Jewish girl. So the family brought this girl to be converted, because they're going to raise her now. I mean, they didn't have, a government agency that decided who's going to adopt. These things didn't exist in, 700 years ago. And so this is a clear case where the people bringing the child are not the child's parents, right? And therefore, when the child becomes an adult, the child can say, I have no interest in being Jewish, right? Another very interesting, there are all sorts of cases nowadays where we can talk about someone whose father is Jewish, which is called Zera Yisrael. And most poskim say there's a mitzvah to try and convert them. All right, we don't push them away, there's a mitzvah to try and convert them. There are people that grew up thinking they were Jewish and were not actually Jewish. This is a common case. I would say it's close to 1/3 of all conversions in the United States, is someone marries a Jew who always identifies, I've heard this must be 1,000 times, this story, that growing up in church, they always heard about the children of Israel, and they always felt pulled, identified with the children of Israel, right? And so they went out. How do you become one of the famous ways to become an American citizen? Marry an American citizen, right? So how do you become Jewish? You marry someone Jewish. And these people, it is very common. They undergo a Reform conversion, then they undergo a conservative conversion, then they want an Orthodox conversion. And they're dragging their spouse, kicking and screaming along with them. Anyway, these are very common things. And that is a much easier case of conversion to do. That's probably the easiest case of conversion to do. Someone who's converting to marry someone Jewish is very difficult, because they have a clear ulterior motive.
Hold on. Maybe I missed. So the first one you're saying they were already married.
They're already married. They've gone through several conversions. They've gone through several conversions, right? The non-Jewish spouse has gone through several conversions, learning more and more as time goes on. It's clear that they really want to be Jewish. That they want to, right? This isn't enough. They want more and more and more. All right. The fact that they have a Jewish spouse that knows nothing about Yiddishkeit, they're dragging them along and forcing them to do things, right? This is an entirely, this is a relatively easy case to determine. However, if a woman or a man is coming And they say the reason they're converting is their spouse their fiance won't marry them unless they convert. It's very difficult to determine whether they're sincere or not, right? And those conversions take more examination than some of the others. The other one that's very hard, by the way, is someone that grew up thinking they're Jewish because they thought what they were doing their entire life was Jewish. Now the state of Israel rejects them, or this, they don't want that, so now they want to. It's very difficult to evaluate why they want to do the conversion. All right, these are the basic elements of the reasons why people are coming to convert
Go back
today.
to let's say the woman